Welcome to It's Our Destiny
To Be Shady
podcast.
Today we will be talking about
Depression, suicide, and mental illness. Going into it, I've struggled with depression my whole life. I was actually diagnosed with clinical depression, anxiety, and then recently after I had my daughter, I was diagnosed with ADHD. Growing up with depression, I didn't understand what was wrong with me, why I felt the way that I did. My parents didn't understand it. And it also stems from being undiagnosed ADHD. So growing up, I felt like I was a burden to everybody. Like the way that I felt, the way that I acted affected other people. And I couldn't fix it. I didn't know how to make myself not feel like that. Mm-hmm. And it was really hard. It affected my family. Like with my ADHD being undiagnosed, when they would try and take me places when I was very little, my socks wouldn't feel right, my shoes wouldn't feel right, my clothes didn't feel right on my body, and so I would have panic attacks where I'd freak out. And it was like that, going to school and everything, I would be late to school a lot because I'd have panic attacks about my things not fitting, something wasn't right. And so it was hard on my mom because she didn't understand why I was like that, why I was acting like that, but it was something that I really couldn't control. And I also have, I don't know the terminology for it, but when you're asked to do something or told to do something as a kid, or even as an adult, I still struggle with it, but it's better now that I'm older. You feel like your autonomy's being taken away, like you don't have the choice to do it.
Yeah,
So it was like a fight, and it wasn't me trying to be rebellious or defiant. It was literally it'll send your body into a fight or flight.
See, growing up with me, it started kind of in the first grade. I've always known that my stepdad has had depression, and so he's always struggled with it. He takes pills for it, and when he's off his pills, he gets moody and upset and
irritable.
Stuff like that. Yeah, very irritable. But growing up in first grade, I had this teacher, and I had just broken my right wrist, so I couldn't write. So with my left wrist, or with my left hand, I had to learn how to write.
Mm-hmm.
And since my teacher couldn't read it, she told me, since I can't read it, I'm not going to grade it. And so for me, that just kind of tore my whole world down, because I'm an overachiever. I love to get stuff done.
Yeah.
And really work hard on the things to achieve and get them done. But she told my stepdad, because my stepdad came in to sit with me, and she absolutely loved my stepdad in school because she taught him as well.
Mm-hmm.
So when she realized that he was my stepdad, she started being nicer to me. But so it was really hard. It was super embarrassing. I didn't want to be there while he was sitting there, but I did my work anyways. And she had told my stepdad that she has ADHD, you need to get her on pills. And so for my parents, it's medication isn't always the answer.
Yeah, and that's how my family is too, but because I have clinical depression, it'll never go away. So I did have to be put on pills when I was 15. I'm unmedicated right now. But
growing up, I've always been this weird kid. My mom used to think that I had autism because I would walk on my tiptoes.
Mm-hmm. I remember that.
Yeah, and she was kind of worried too because on her side of the family, one of my uncles has a shortened Achilles tendon in both feet.
Mm-hmm.
So he has to walk on his tiptoes. And it also comes with our muscular dystrophy on her side. So it affects males differently sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So since he's had that, she thought it was either that or I had autism or just obviously ADHD as a kid.
Yeah.
So for me, it was always really hard to keep focus, and so I'd get more frustrated with myself over anything, because me trying to focus on something and get it done, I want to get stuff done. I'm motivated to do it, but it's hard to do it when I can't think straight and keep the right mind to do something.
Mm-hmm.
But to go back onto what you were talking about, the autonomy, my mom used to tell me, oh, go and do the dishes, please, when I was already going to go and do the dishes.
Yeah.
And then I wouldn't want to do them anymore. And so it's kind of when you want to do it, it's easier on the mind.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're told to do it, it's well, now I don't want to do it and I have to do it,
Yeah.
So it's it stresses you out more when you feel like you have to do something. Something happened to me that was kind of traumatic when I was 15. And so it felt hard to talk to my parents about it, and it was easier to, whenever I got the feeling and I would think about it, to hurt myself physically so that I would stop thinking about it. And back then, I remember a lot of girls getting judged in high school for doing the same thing that I was doing. And they'd always call them out and be like, oh, you're just an attention seeker, blah, blah, all this stuff. So then I would start doing it higher up on my arms. So for one, my parents wouldn't find it, because this one time when I was coming out of the shower, I just had my towel on, and it was all right here. And my dad had walked in, and my mom was like standing right behind him and noticed like a scratch on my arm, and I just kind of had to hide it. And I was like, no, I'm fine. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, you know, because you don't want your parents to know that you're doing.
My mom was really upset when she found out, because I used to do all my ties.
See, so it was just like it was an easier way to, like, it wasn't deep, it was just enough to kind of get the
a distraction
thought, to go away, and the feeling to go away. But at the same time, like, I kind of felt like I was alone, even though I had already talked to so many people about it and told them my side of it. It still felt like nobody really kind of believed me.
So for me, because I didn't understand what was going on with my brain and everything, like, I didn't really talk to anybody about it in the beginning of my life, because it started to really, my mental health started to decline when I turned about 12, so like about when I hit puberty, it started to decline a lot, and I kept it hidden. I tried to keep it hidden as much as I could. There would be times where I like would be crying on the bathroom floor, and my mom would walk in, she wouldn't understand why, or like during get-togethers I'd go and I would hide because I would be feeling so bad that like I couldn't hide it from people, and I didn't want to bring the mood of the party down, so I would just go and like go somewhere else so that nobody could see until I felt okay. But I ended up telling my parents that I was feeling this way, I think after my uncle was murdered. I believe I told them about how I felt, and they didn't, I don't want to bash on my parents because it's not really their fault. They didn't understand. But they didn't do anything. They didn't seek help for me or anything. So it just kind of felt like no one cared. That's how I felt. And they kind of just saw it as like, well, you're going through puberty. It's a normal part of puberty. So when I got a little bit older, I was about 14. That's when my mental health was the worst. And I felt like I just couldn't do it anymore. Like, I didn't know what to do. Like, my parents didn't understand. It wasn't like the big fights that really affected me as much as it was like the little fights with my family. So the day that I had attempted, the thing that really broke the straw on the camel's back was my dad had yelled at me about my homework or something like that. And I remember me and Shady had been in my bedroom, and this is one of my biggest regrets in my life. Like, I hate that I had done this. I hate thinking about it. Like, it hurts me inside. But I had been saving pills in my dresser, and
Benadryl.
Yeah, it was Benadryl, and I decided that I was going to take them because in that moment it's almost like an out-of-body experience. And like,
how many were in the bag, do you think? 6?
Yeah, about 5 or 6, which isn't a lot, but like, I thought that would do it. So when I decided I was going to take the pills, it was like almost like a euphoric out of body. Like, I wasn't myself. Like, it felt calming, and like, it's going to be over. Like, everything's going to be okay. Like, so I took the pills, and Shady had seen me, and I went into the bathroom that was across from my room, and I remember she was trying to stop me and try and like wrestle me away from the sink, and I kind of shoved her off of me, and I just took the pills. And I remember going and laying on my bed and just waiting, and she was crying on the floor. And in that, like, because you're not yourself in that moment, it like, I felt so much relief, and like, all I can explain it as is like euphoric.
I remember laying in the hallway between the bathroom. Like, after you pushed me, I'd gone and laid down in the hallway because I was upset because I couldn't do anything more.
Yeah.
And I just remember laying there and praying to God that like it wouldn't be enough, and they wouldn't hurt you, and you wouldn't die, and just like praying for all these outcomes, that you would be okay. And when you were laying on your bed I think you were laying on there, I don't even know how long, like it felt like minutes had passed, but we were really laying there for like hours.
Yeah.
Like it was a while.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had gone upstairs.
So as I was laying there, I looked over at you and I just saw you laying on the floor, and it really, like, I thought about my niece, that my sister-in-law was pregnant with my niece at the time, and like if she had gone through depression, if like anything like that, and I really, like, it hit me like what I had done to you, and like because like that's a traumatizing thing for you to go through too, and I'm sorry that I did that to you, but
No, you weren't in your mind space. Like you weren't thinking.
Yeah.
Nobody in that mind space does.
Mm-hmm.
Like when my grandma had passed away, she was not in the right mind space.
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't even herself.
Yeah.
Like, and I've heard too a lot of people like say that when people commit suicide, they're happier.
Mm-hmm.
They do a lot more happier things. Like they know
Mm-hmm.
that they're going to do it. So that's a big thing to watch out for. Like with people with
Mm-hmm.
depression, as soon as they're like super happy and just like like nothing could bother them, that's when you know that they probably decided to commit suicide.
Mm-hmm. And so I realized like what I had done to you, and that's traumatizing for you too. And then I also realized like my niece, what if she goes through depression, like, and struggles how I've struggled, and nobody in my family at that point had really understood. And so I decided that I needed to be there in case anybody else in the family had gone through what I went through. I needed to be there so that I could understand and help them, because I didn't want them to be in the same place that I was in. So I decided to go up and tell my parents what I had done, and they were very angry. I don't know if you remember.
I think I remember your mom yelling like, why would you do this? And then your dad kind of blaming you.
Mm-hmm.
And then your mom, like a few minutes later, came down and called to me and told me that she's taking me home.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember bawling the entire way home, crying and asking if you're gonna be okay. And
Mm-hmm. And I remember after we dropped Shady off, we headed to the ER. And when we had gone there, they had to have a lady from DFS come. And the doctor had told my parents that I would be sleepy, like I hadn't taken enough to hurt me, but I would be really tired and I'd be asleep. So I decided I was going to pretend like I was asleep, because I didn't want to face like my family, and because they didn't understand and they were just mad at me. So I pretended I was laying there and pretending to be asleep. Well, the lady from DFS came into the hospital room, and as I'm laying there, they all thought I was asleep and couldn't hear what they said. But the DFS lady told my parents that I was doing it all for attention, and if I really wanted to die, I would have tried harder. That was probably the most hurtful sentence I've ever heard in my life, and it crushed me.
that's messed up for you to go through alone. I remember when I walked through the doors, like I couldn't even really think straight, so there's not a lot that I do remember, but I remember walking through the doors and looking at my stepdad sitting in his chair, and then looking at my mom and just bawling, like breaking down. And my mom said, it's okay, like they're taking her to the ER, they're gonna get her stomach pumped. And I just remember like crying out and like saying, is she gonna be okay, like freaking out.
Mm-hmm.
And my stepdad said that you probably hadn't taken enough to hurt you, and I was like, good, because that's what I prayed for. And so sorry, I know it sounds like crazy, but like that's literally like
that's exactly what happened. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I just remember thinking like, good, that's what I prayed for, and I really hope that like God's protecting you and watching over you. And I just remember like laying in my mom's lap and just like bawling my eyes out. And then when we had heard that you had gotten out of the hospital,
it was really like not really awkward, but it was like kind of awkward after everything had happened, because so after that happened, my family decided to take me to a counselor. And so when I went and talked to them, I did get diagnosed with anxiety and clinical depression. And they told my mom that I needed to be put on medication. Well, that made my mom very angry, because they don't think that medication's always the answer. In that case, it should have been the answer. I did end up eventually getting put on medication. I don't remember when, but I remember the counselor that had recommended medication the first time I went, we never went back to her. I ended up going to a different counselor, and I ended up really didn't like counseling, because I didn't like talking about like how I felt and things like that, and it just kind of felt like they didn't really care. Like, this is their job to listen to me. They have to. So it didn't feel like they actually cared.
I'm sorry that you had to go through that. But I remember when they told me that you gotten out of the hospital, I felt so relieved and I knew that you'd be okay. But I remember my mom telling me that, like, I couldn't go over there for a couple of days until everything calmed down. So when we did hang out the next time, I was so just excited to see you and, like, still have you here.
Yeah.
And I felt bad that I always blamed myself for it, that I wasn't able to kind of protect you and, like, stop you. And I was always super upset at myself that I wasn't strong enough to, you know, like, I would always think back on that situation and wonder what more I could have done to stop it.
And there was nothing.
Yeah. Like, but it was mostly through the first 2 days that we couldn't see each other. That's, like, all I would think about was what I could have done more to stop it and help you. And
yeah. Which, and it really breaks down to, like, understanding depression, understanding mental health. And, like, if your child is showing signs of that, like, you need early intervention. Like, you really need to step in and help your kids and just be open. Like, mental health is a real thing, and a lot of people don't see, like, that mental health is a real thing and it's a real issue that needs to have intervention.
Yeah.
It's not something that'll just go away, which there is different kinds of depression, and clinical depression doesn't always go away. And I know other people with depression don't like this saying either, and I really don't like it, but I hate when people tell me, like, which suicide is never an option. But for me, having depression, I hate when people tell me to not make a permanent decision for a temporary problem, because my depression is not temporary.
Right. And I feel like most people who are coming from that, they do not have any mental illness. They're perfectly okay. So they just see it as like oh, you'll get over it type of thing. And so, and I'm not, like, okaying what they're saying to you. Yeah. I'm just saying, like, I feel like that's where they're coming through with their point of view is, like, it's temporary, you'll be okay, so, like, don't end it all just because one bad day or something.
And which, that's why I said, like, obviously suicide's never an option, but, like, from my point of view, having depression, that's a saying that I don't like. What I like to tell people is, like, that have clinical depression is it's not temporary, it is a permanent thing. You'll never get over it, but it'll get easier. You'll learn to deal with it, you'll learn coping. It'll get easier. It will never go away, but it will get easier.
100%. For me, I don't know if I had depression or not, because, like, I wasn't diagnosed with it or anything like that, but when I was cutting myself back in high school, I did feel like right then and there, like, the whole world was just, like, coming down on me and I was all alone and stuff like that. But then I realized now, like, I don't know at what point I grew out of that, but I was fine eventually at some point, and even now.
After I had made the attempt on my life, my brother and my sister-in-law, because they were about to have a baby, they had, like, voiced their opinion, which it is their choice, but they didn't want me around their baby because they didn't know, like, if I would end up hurting the baby or, like, anything like that, which that's something I would never do.
Right.
But, and then not being allowed to be around you, and I kind of was isolated. I wasn't allowed to go places. I wasn't allowed to do a lot of things. And isolation almost made it worse. It made me feel like I was just, like, this horrible person. What I had done was, like, horrible, which it isn't good, and it does affect everybody else. But it, like, almost made my depression worse, because I felt like nobody wanted to be around me. Nobody trusted me. Nobody, like, I don't know how to explain it, but...
Yeah, I get where you're coming from. And also, I've noticed too, like, in high school, your mom kind of, like, cracked the whip. Like, we would have to go home during lunches and go walk back up to the high school, and she had to know our whereabouts after school. Like, there was a lot of having to communicate of our whereabouts and where we were going and what we were doing. And even at some point, our moms spied us at a park.
Yeah, with binoculars.
Yeah. So,
which I understand where they're coming from with that kind of stuff as a mom.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it, like, almost made it feel like
you had no privacy. You weren't your own person. You had to, like, really play by a role, basically. Like, you were in a movie.
Yeah, like, I had to play a part. I wasn't allowed to be
yourself. Me. Yeah. Because I've noticed, too, like, when our friend, the guy friend, was coming around and stuff like that. Like, your mom trusted him a lot, but it was also like playing a role because you know,
we had to be a certain way, otherwise things wouldn't go right.
Yeah, exactly. And so with that being like said, like, it's hard to, like, props to all the actresses and actors out there, because it is hard to kind of play a role and try to be this perfect person
it really
when
is.
you know, people make mistakes. That's just who we are. Like, that's why God gave us the earth, is to make mistakes and learn
and
from
gave
it.
us free will.
And Jesus, yeah. And he gave his son for us to, well, I'm not going to get religious, but yeah, that's why we have our lives, is to make mistakes and learn from them and grow from them, because you're not going to grow from something if you don't make that mistake.
Yeah.
So,
thank you for watching. Bye. So going into it, I've struggled with depression my whole life. I've struggled with depression my whole life. Depression, suicide, and
I think that about covers it. Mental illnesses in general.
Mental illness. So after that, I had
It's not gonna be the intro. Do it really close to the mic so they can hear it.
Anyways.
Welcome to the coughing show, where all we do is sit here for an hour. Revving our engines.
I think mine's a little broken.
That's just your huh? That's just your honk, honey, is what I was trying to say. Oh. And I almost said your honk. And the chick just left. Did she? That was her truck. No? Her truck's not. Oh, okay. I just saw a white truck drive by, so I thought it was hers. Because this entire time they've been talking while we were talking.
I know. My heart's like pounding. You'll never... Okay.
It's not your fault, though. Like,
I know, but like... And I think it's also because of like how my brother and sister-in-law acted about it and all that. Like, it makes me like hate myself.
But you shouldn't, because like you weren't in your own mindset.
And then it also, I should have talked about, he laid in bed and just ignored me while I'm sitting there fucking bawling and begging him to go hide the gun. He just laid in bed and was going to sleep.
That's messed up.
You
should have come and talked to me.
Yeah, I think it was when you guys lived in the other apartment.
Oh. Because I remember him hiding something in the top of our closet, but I can't remember what it was.
No, he never hid my gun. Then I had voiced to him that I was feeling that way and I needed him to hide my gun. He didn't. Like in that mindset, like in that moment, like you don't want to talk to anybody about it. You don't want anyone to know. And since he was like sleeping in the same bed as me, he would have known because I was like fucking like bawling. So I like talked to him about it and then he didn't do shit about it. And like, if that were me in that situation, I'd stay up and be like, are you okay? Like,
damn. See, and that's what a real person does, who cares, who understands, like, where other people are coming from, is because of that.
That's exactly, I think God was talking to me and telling me, like, you need to be here because you're going through this and you'll be able to help other people going through this.
See, with me, like, my entire pregnancy with Cam, I also had that feeling a lot because my dad would always, like, tell me, well, if you wouldn't have opened your legs, and I just felt like such a horrible person for ending up getting pregnant. But, so... with how much guilt I had, I always felt like it'd be better off if I just wasn't here. And I'd always think of ways that I could kill myself. And like, I even at one point thought about taking a knife to my throat and slitting it. Like, that's how bad it got. And I just knew that like I couldn't kill myself in the life inside of me because the life needed me to grow and everybody else around me would be so upset.
But I've never told anyone this before, and I don't want you to think I'm gonna like kill myself because of this. But I do have a suicide note in my lockbox.
I wrote one out one time on my phone, on my notes, in my old flip phone that I had.
Yep, I have one in my lockbox, and
So it's not crazy. I think it's normal. It's just like
I have like the way that I wrote it, I have like explaining like in general to everybody, and then I have like little notes for everyone. I always have a brain fart. What do we say?
I know. Forgot what we say too. Thanks for watching. At the same time.
Okay.